Energy Advancement Hub, which is a platform which is advancing energy transition through e-learning, online community building, research, and consulting. My name is Tatiana Mitrova. I'm researcher at the Center on Global Energy Policy of Columbia University, professor at Sciences Po in Paris, and founder and director of the New Energy Advancement Hub. And it happened that I have 12 years of executive education experience on energy transition. I'm also happy to present our guests, Professor Manfred Hafner, who has been teaching energy transition and decarbonization topics for more than a decade at the Johns Hopkins University and at Sciences Po, together with myself, as well as for the World Executive Education programs like the New Energy Business School. And also Leon Still, who has background in energy sciences and who is running his own company as an independent energy expert through his label, New Energy Institute. And he also holds several teaching positions at the Universities of Applied Sciences. So he has also over 12 years of experience in various roles, from business developer to lecturer to general manager within the energy transition. So there is plenty of knowledge on education, on energy transition in this room. Manfred, Leon, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having invited me.
Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to make a disclaimer. It's a very unofficial conversation, like sharing opinions during the coffee. None of us knows the right answers. We can only collectively brainstorm on this extremely important topic and share some of our thoughts. And I would strongly encourage our audience to ask the questions, to make the comments, because it will only increase our understanding of this really quite controversial and complicated topic. So, guys, according to the International Renewable Energy Agency, up until 2030, energy transition workforce is expected to more than double. Yeah, so the surge in demand is enormous. There is crucial need for professionals in this sector. But I see that on the supply side, if I can put it this way, there is some frustration. I see many people who feel the lack of knowledge and understanding of the energy transition, who are confused about choosing the best approach to study the new energy technologies and markets, or to stay up to date in this constantly changing and evolving field. It feels like, it's impossible to know everything. So to start, I would suggest to discuss what are the typical requests and complaints here. And again, I will encourage our audience also to write their comments in the event chat. We will see them. So Leon, I will first turn to you. What is difficult about starting energy transition today?
What is difficult? That's a good question. I think it's in general is of course a complicated topic because it's very broad. So you see that if you compare it with more traditional energy topics that were much more focused on things like oil and gas, of course, and then you have the energy transition, which then goes from things that look a little bit like oil and gas, like for example biogas or other liquid fuels, all the way to solar panels with somebody who is working now or has experience or does an education or gas has nothing to do with, because it's electric system. So talking about that energy transition as a whole makes it already very complicated. But if you then want to learn about it, of course, you need to always put in a little bit of focus so that the complication is a little bit less difficult for you to choose within what you like yourself, of course, but also what you like in your field or in the direction you are studying anyway, because it's not completely new that you can. There are, of course, education that has to do with, okay, I'm teaching something about the energy transition. My own master's, for example, was called Sustainable Development, Sustainable Energy Development. So then it's all in the name, you know, for sure. It's not about oil and gas. But a lot of these things, of course, are not so clear. And you need to really work on that to see what makes it easier for you to do.
Great, Manfred. I'm turning to you. So what requests are you facing when students are approaching you and asking, what should I do? Yeah, what kind of problems do you see in this whole area?
My students, but I do teach in executive education, and I do teach at the university where in graduate school. So that's a different population, of course. But fundamentally, what I always tell them, there is no answer to such a general question. You need to do your own homework first. You need to understand what drives you in life, what your assets are already, those who have already a professional experience, where do you come from, and then where do you want to go. Energy transition is a very broad topic, but nobody is and nobody needs to be an expert on everything in no field. Just like medicine, nobody is an expert on everything, and that's the reason why we have generalists who are not experts on everything, but they know something about everything. And then we have cardiologists, we have whoever else, and here it's the same. So try to understand where you want to go, and never forget about your passion. Passion is very important. We need to work for life, and we are happy. I hope it's not we need to work. We have opportunity to work in life, and we spend most of us at least 8 hours a day. Most of us, many of us, much more. If we do not do it with passion, forget about it. It's a nightmare. So if you want to work in this wonderful new world of opportunities, which is creating a planet which is more livable, which is better. There are all kinds of people needed at different levels and at different disciplines. So and everything, there is a place for everybody. So just you need to understand and do your own homework, how to connect the dots from what you know best to what you would like to do, and how to get there.
Great points, Manfred. I would suggest to stress, we've got already several, I suppose, very important ideas just to fix them, not to lose. So first of all, nobody can be expert in everything. Yeah, just give up from the very beginning. Just don't even try to be an expert in everything. But I would add to that probably some broader picture in mind is nevertheless needed. Yeah, and
Maybe.
that means that you have it to improve. Yeah,
exactly. Now, I was triggered a little bit. What Manfred was saying is that, of course, you have these different levels of. You need to have your own interest and things like that. But it is not only. Let's not make it also that complicated. Because there's also plenty of examples of people that I know that, for example, were before they were building houses or they were doing something on building steel constructions, and now they're working, setting up windmills in the North Sea, for example. So yeah, then you can say, okay, these people have shifted from working in the building environment to the energy transition, but what that person is actually doing is not that different. Only the view is slightly different. So you need to know a little bit more. Yeah, but you don't have to start over again. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but Leon, I want you to elaborate a bit more on that, because look, we cannot find energy transition professionals with, let's say, 40 years of experience. Yeah, like we can for the oil industry. Yeah, but this industry is so new. Yeah, it's just a decade and a half, maybe maximum 2 decades in certain parts of the world. But there are many people who are moving into this area from the other professional areas. Yeah, and who are adapting their, let's say, traditional energy expertise, experience, and skill set for the opportunities in the energy transition. So what about them? Very experienced people with strong background, but who have to gain this understanding of this new area.
those are, I think, the two levels also. You need to focus on what Manfred was saying, that if you have the more formal education on all levels, that needs to change too. That needs to be have a better fit to what we require in the future. But that takes always, depending on where you are in the world, some are a little bit further than others. But it takes just a little bit longer to get that into the system, so to say. But once you are indeed working in a traditional energy company, then a lot of that skill set is still applicable also to a lot of things you require in any transition, like this building example, but also geothermal and exploration technologies for oil and gas. They're not the same, but you need 80 or 90% of the things you are doing every day is the same. So it's just a question of that you add a little bit on top of your knowledge that you already have in the focus area that you require, that you find interesting, and then you can learn better for the future, basically. You can be prepared better for the future. Sorry, Manfred, you were...
Yeah, Manfred, go ahead, please.
No, I fully subscribe to what Leon just said. I would just like to add the 2 points. One is examples. Leon brought his example of the construction workers and so on. If we talk about white-collar jobs, for instance, an engineer, somebody who has worked in engineering, in power generation, or in the oil and gas industry or whatever. We need engineers in the new world. We need engineers. We need mechanical engineers. We need electrical engineers. We need chemical engineers. We need people who do business development. We need people who understand the policies, the public relations with governments and so on. So all of these jobs, which people did in the old industries, well, what you have learned there will be very useful to apply them to the new world. And I think all of us who some time ago went to the university, we have never, and we should not have, and we haven't been trained to solve one problem. And that is what we are supposed to do all our life. We should have received, and we have received tools to solve problems, because problems, they evolve over time. And with these tools, and even somebody who has worked, Tatiana, you said somebody who has worked 20 years in the oil and gas industry. If somebody has worked 20 years in the oil and gas industry, the industry has evolved over 20 years. He will not have done the same job. He will have evolved with the industry and with the jobs and so on. And he may have done different jobs there. So there is nothing special to apply the tools which people have learned at university and experience people have acquired working in different industries to a new industry. And my last point here is, don't see this as a problem, as a challenge. See this as an opportunity. There is nothing more boring in life than doing all your life the same thing. It's a nightmare. The only reason
some people may like it, Manfred. That could be a possibility.
No,
of course.
but the only
everybody.
reason why we can develop passion and we love something and we enjoy something if there are new challenges, new opportunities, and if you can do something new. This is my opinion. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to do something new, to do something useful for the planet. And each of us has plenty of skills needed in the new world. We just need to combine the dots.
Yeah. To add on top of what you already can do. But it does require, I think, a new mindset. That's something you mentioned too, is that, okay, you need to be able to, because sometimes in my work as well, I see some oil and gas or traditional energy companies and professionals that feel a little bit under threat, or they feel a little bit like, okay, I've been working all this time, providing energy for the world, and now suddenly that's not enough anymore. Now suddenly you have to think about other things. But that's also just a mindset in that sense. That's the mindset that you need to be able to change to a little bit more flexibility. It's not a threat as such. It's just creative destruction of whatever we are doing at the moment. But it is still a little bit of destruction. And that means you as a person need to change to be able to well, survive that destruction. So you can also work in other fields. And there's plenty of material and things you can do that are out there.
Yes.
Okay, and then I have a question to both of you, a tricky question. So let's imagine a person who has been working in the oil and gas industry, for example, for 15, 20 years and decided to move into the new energies. And what would be probably the best approach? Moving into, let's say, something close, comparatively close, like biogas, as Leon, you've mentioned, or let's say blue hydrogen or something like this, or and slowly expanding expertise in the neighboring areas, or to get first this helicopter view, learning the fundamentals of, let's say, sustainability, climate change, what are the different energy technologies. So is it bottom-up approach or vice versa? What is more efficient from your experience? Or combining both?
Yeah, I do think you need to start from that perspective first. You know, like a helicopter view almost, to understand why this transition is happening in the first place and what does this mean for how the world perhaps looks like in a few years. I think that's always a good idea to do. But then but once you know that could be relatively simple, but you need to be open for that, of course. But after that, unless you want to have a completely new career, which is also a valid thing to pursue. It's always a bit easier maybe and less resistance to work within your more or less your field and to, you know, not specialize, but to expand on that further towards what can be done in the energy transition. To select the topics that you require because that's probably also your interest. Your interest was or is in that particular area. So that makes it also much more easy to work on that. But maybe that is at least my idea. But yeah, you can of course do both.
By the way, we've got a related question from one of our listeners. How would you personally, you Manfred and you Leon, teach the following topic? What are the primary drivers and barriers influencing the global energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources? From methodological point of view, how would you structure such a course?
If I may start with this one, I have been teaching for more than 10 years now energy transition topics, and everybody would do it differently, obviously, but the way I do it is always interdisciplinary. The new world we are in, it is difficult to understand the world we are in not taking an interdisciplinary approach. There are technological drivers, there are economic drivers, there are socio-economic drivers, social drivers, policy drivers. And so I think if one wants to understand what's going on, one really has to take a holistic view on all of this. And then, of course, fundamentally, there are two fundamental driving forces which are complementing each other. There is today the top-down driving force. Policymakers require society to change, of course, because society has asked policymakers to change. But at the end of the day, it's a policy is mainly top-down today. It doesn't have to be like this, but this is the way it works. And at the same time, we have bottom-up market forces with new technologies which are being developed, and those are those are bottom-up, and then everything works together.
Yeah. Maybe a few things then, you know, if you talk about, okay, how would you then teach that, or in what way? And we can have a whole webinar on what are the drivers and the barriers, probably more than multiple days. But I always find that it is a good idea to start, of course, like, okay, why are you doing this in the first place? Because it's not a financial thing. It's not an economic driver as such. I mean, otherwise you would just continue with oil and gas because that makes the most money. There's no problem there. But the concept of why you're doing this, because you want to avoid some kind of form of catastrophic climate change, for a lot of people, that's a very big concept to fully grasp. So I usually try to bring it down to some other aspects of, for example, pollution, local pollution, things like that, that is a bit more tangible and practical for people to understand that may be also a reason why you switch from one thing to the other thing. So that you have a better idea, okay, that is a driver, and that's why all the policies and everybody has been implementing these things to make it more difficult on the one hand for fossil fuel to be further used and make it more easy for the others to grow. I think that's always a good way to try to make it very practical and understanding, because from the perspective of where you are sitting, that is different. If you're in South Africa, you just want the lights to go on all the time instead of 8 hours a day that you don't have the light. But then it's fine. It's difficult to get this more climate change as such as a driver to do that. So you need to bring it down, I think, to more of a practical level, what works for people themselves.
Leon, I think you've raised a very important dimension here, because my personal impression is that, just theoretical learning of energy transition doesn't really help a lot. Because when you face the reality, it turns out to be quite different compared to the manual books. Some beautiful concepts which are looking great in the PowerPoint presentation, they get actually destroyed in a couple of minutes when you are communicating with the real life people who are building this stuff with their own hands. So the question for both of you, for the for learning energy transition, how important the practical part of this learning, like project work, group work, some learning by doing, how important is it here? Is it more than in the, let's say, traditional energy, or is it basically the same story?
I think actually it is the same, probably, in terms of how much practical experience or how much experience you would need to also learn, of course, what you have been taught. I think that is more or less the same. But what for the energy transition also is a thing that is very scattered. I mean, in the more traditional sense, we had this very large power plants and things like that, and oil and gas wells, which were, centralized large installations where people were either producing it and using it and converting it to energy. And the energy transition topics, like things like biogas, solar panels on top of your roof, or small scale hydropower, or things like that, is much more a community level effort. So then that is a different way of working on a project. There's still, of course, these huge things. I mean, an offshore wind park is still an enormous investment and a very professional enterprise. So that is the same as set in technical terms as setting up an oil and gas field, for example. But not if you're talking about these smaller scale things, then you need to other things, like Manfred said in the beginning, more social aspects, more community engagement aspects, things like that. It's not only hardcore engineering and then we're done with it. You need the other things as well. And then the practical experience is the main reason, I think, to learn from that.
That's Manfred. Would you like to add on that, or I would switch to the next recommendation?
Just one sentence. Mm-hmm. Leon is right. It is as important. Practical experience as important as in other domains. The problem is we have an old way of teaching and a more modern way of teaching. In the old days, it was unidirectional. In the new way, it is multidirectional, which is much more efficient. But this is independent on the topic you are teaching.
Okay, so here that you've moved already to the topic that I wanted to raise, which is about educational formats. Yeah, because so we understood already, and I think we've all agreed that first, it is lifelong learning, because it is changing all the time. And Manfred was very inspiring, explaining to us how important it is actually to remain curious, enthusiastic, and learning for all our lives. And you've mentioned that it's very important to make an audit first of what assets you have, what is your background and skill set and knowledge base, and then to develop a plan where you want to move and to start moving there. Yeah. So this move, and it will be, I assume, very individual depending on your background and also your age, availability of time, money, because it will be very different for 18-year-old or for the working professional, let's say 35-year-old. Yeah. So with these different educational paths in energy transition for students, for mid-career, for second career, actually, I see quite many people who are approaching to the age of retirement, and they get extremely excited about energy transition. They start to learn, and they are also doing some fantastic, really impressive things. And for me, it also looks extremely inspiring that, like, starting the next career. So for them, with different backgrounds, technology, economics, politics, law, marketing, whatever, from the methodological point of view, how would you suggest to build this individual trajectory? Do you have any advices to our audience here?
Yes, I do have. Let me tell you a story. The way I normally explain it to my students. My students, those who are 25 years old, more plus minus, they are young, they are brilliant, from brilliant top universities, brilliant students, but they are lost because they are young, and they ask me, what should I do? And of course, I cannot tell them, I shouldn't tell them what they should do. The only thing I do tell them, as I told you before, is to give them a structure, a canvas, and how they themselves can make a decision. So normally I tell them, take a piece of paper, an empty piece of paper, and write down what you think your strengths and your weaknesses are. And then put this piece of paper in a safe. And then go to see somebody whom you trust, a friend, but this is valid for young people. For 40 plus years old, it may less be of importance, but maybe yes. Go to see somebody you trust. Don't go to see your mother who is in love with you. Go and see your father or your best friends, and ask them the same question. What are your strengths and weaknesses for a professional life? And then once you have received that, and tell them that this is very important for you because you need that in order to figure out what you want to do. And then you compare the two pieces of paper, and don't necessarily make the mistake to think that other people, if the things are not the same, that they are all wrong and only you are right. Maybe they see you better than what you see yourself. There are plenty of young people, but also less young people, who are overconfident about what they are able to do, and plenty of people who are underconfident about what they are able to do. So it's good to have another people's view and then try to figure out what is the reality. Very often other people, especially if you ask more than one person, and if they're consistently saying the same, chances are high that they are right. Now, you have understood what are your strong and weak points. Then you take another piece of paper and you write down what your dream job is. And then below that, you write down what you think the requirements are for that dream job. And then you try to combine to see how to get there. Because it's not about knowledge. The impression I have from the questions we get is that if I do not have a certain knowledge, I cannot do the other job. No, it's about capabilities. It's about attitudes. It's about, am I a good public speaker? Am I not a good public speaker? Am I good in analytical thinking? Am I not good in analytical thinking? Am I a good writer or not? Am I a leader or not? Because this is about the jobs we need, and we need all these jobs. Be it a project manager, we need salespeople, we need business developers, we need technicians in all kinds of fields, including energy transition. So you need to understand, where are you strong, in which of these things, and where are these things needed, and then it's relatively simple to make the move. But the story is a little bit longer, but I don't want to make it too long. But I think you understood what it is all about.
It's a very good point, I think. Maybe to add, because indeed, what you said, Mom, is very important. But if you then indeed do need the knowledge, I think with the advent of all kinds of technologies that we're using nowadays, that makes it much more easier to get it. So there's of course a little bit dependent on your level of education and also your place in your career, so to say. If you're still very young and you're just graduated and you want to then extend your education with some more energy transition topics, then it's also important to look at accreditation and things like that, because your first job relies much more on how valuable your diploma was basically than on your experience. But later on, if you're a bit more experienced, then you can get a lot of this information quite a bit more easy. And it's also something, there was one of the questions in the chat I saw, somebody asked like, okay, how can I make sure that young people are focused, that they keep on focused on and do the time investment that is required to learn about any transition topics. And I think that can be done with more focused and more exciting ways of teaching, which could be, some self-paced learning things, artificial intelligence, or I don't know, a virtual reality type of systems. That gives you a much better and quicker understanding and more condensed way of getting the knowledge, instead of you doing another 4 years of university study or a PhD on it or something like that. That's not for everybody, and also not needed for most people to do. And on top of that, it's also a good idea, I think, to not only look at what all kinds of companies and individuals can teach you, but you could also listen and join, at least in some, I know in the Netherlands and Sweden where I live, you have these sort of community groups that come together that look more on, that are concerned about the environment, and then they set up solar panels or whatever, and they want discussions about that, on how that goes and what it is. And there you can also get that information. So that's the interesting, I think, on today's technology, like we are talking now with a webinar. There's a lot more available than maybe 20 or 30 years ago, and the way you get taught as well is much more exciting.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. When I was young, I was happy if from time to time I could get hold of a book. Today we are submerged with information. We are in an information age. We get the problem is to separate the good document from the many bad documents, but there are so many interesting good documents and videos and the internet. So there is no need to go back to university and it may be a waste of time. And then the question you asked earlier on, Tatiana, is it better to have a formal teaching or to learn on the job? I mean, this again, it depends on the personality of the different people. But a lot of things can be learned by reading newspapers, by reading. I mean, to get this general understanding we were talking about. This people can get by reading newspapers, by reading articles in the internet, by going to the website of the International Energy Agency, of IRENA, of Carbon. I mean, there are plenty of very good sites, and there are also very good trainings, executive trainings, like NEA is proposing things, the New Energy Business School is proposing. There are plenty of by the way, where Leon used to be a director, and there are plenty of schools which are proposing executive education. Some of them you need to pay, some of them are more or less for free, or cost more or cost less. But if you are offered a job to start something, do it, because you have acquired so much of experience in your previous job. You will have plenty of things which are much better compared to somebody who has done a formal education but doesn't have experience. I think the most important thing which I heard today from other people than from me is when Leon said the word mindset. I have the impression that somebody who joins us today, which means who has questions about this. So people who do not have questions about this, they wouldn't be here, and who have been worked for 20 years in a certain field, and they have the impression that it is a sunset industry, and they would like to work for a rising industry, either because they believe in it or because they want to make a living out of it. Ideally both. There is no reason whatsoever why you should be afraid. Maybe the only problem is your mindset. So work on your mindset.
Wow, that was a great speech. Thank you, Manfred. And Leon, thank you so much also for raising all these issues. And actually, I mean, first of all, my personal thanks for mentioning the role of communities, because that's exactly what New Energy Advancement Hub is building, a community. And by the way, guys, those who are watching this broadcast, there will be a link and you can join the community. Please just join us, and it's a great platform to enhance your knowledge, your understanding, to see the new jobs, to see and career opportunities, to see the new publications. By the way, Manfred's books are all there. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's really I mean, building network with the people who are also enthusiastic about the same things that you are inspired with. It really helps. But also, as Manfred was explaining, even reading newspapers, and going to the websites that he mentioned and many others, so the self-education, it really helps. But if we are looking at the traditional formal education, so there are universities, there are business schools, there are different training programs. There are, by the way, we didn't mention, but I think it's really important, internal corporate programs available in many large companies. So it is also something to look at. There are short training courses, online courses, which take a couple of hours on specific topics, which also can improve your knowledge. And also, what was interesting about your both interventions is you both mentioned the importance of the soft skills. Frankly, I thought that it's my obsession, because that is something I'm very much focusing on in the New Energy Advancement Hub, like providing not only the hard skills, not only the subject knowledge, but also all the soft skills. But I was really pleased to see that you share this approach, because what you were saying about the mindset, that's probably the explanation why it matters. So if you have any specific learning or training options in mind that you would like to share with the participants, please do it. Because we are trying to collect and to publish on a regular basis, like a directory of different options, starting from universities and ending up with these online training events. So if you have anything, please do share.
Now, maybe to add, because I think it's the soft skill part, you always need to combine with the hard skills. So you need to understand, of course, what you're talking about. And in the end, if we want to, for example, install an electrolyzer somewhere, then somebody needs to be able to do that safely, hopefully. But indeed, it's also, for example, we are trying to launch a hydrogen learning platform. And one aspect of that is how you can do a just transition. And so how do you make sure that instead of only saying, okay, we need it for the big industries, that's fine. And then you, in our case, we are focusing much more on Africa and India, for example, as a production place for hydrogen. Then we don't want to only extract that. So you also need to know, okay, how can you then, build up more regional community level understanding of how you can then also as a community, have a place in that whole energy, that part of the energy transition. So not everything, but in this case focused on hydrogen. I think that those are the things that are also good to combine. But it depends on what you are in your career after, I think. So if you're having a certain idea, okay, I need to switch from hardcore oil and gas drilling towards solar panels, then of course that requires a whole different way of thinking about it than going a little bit only to the left or to the right, so to say. And there you need much more soft skills to understand what your place could be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, if the new world requires, for instance, it's really difficult to discuss this topic because every single case is different. I mean, I don't have a problem in doing a mentorship with one-to-one, but to talk in general, it's very difficult. So if we are talking about technical jobs, engineering type of jobs, if the new world requires to design, build, implement, develop, do business development of wind turbines, wind farms, electrolyzers, hydrogen, whatever, the underlying technical knowledge, you have very, very similar thing in the old industry as well. So yes, I mean, it is part of the lifelong learning which everybody has to do, even if he stays in the same industry. So there is nothing magic about it. I would not advise anybody to go from, if he is a very, very technical engineer, unless he has a passion and therefore he's good in, to go into public policy. But maybe there are people who are very good in that, but I mean, the previous experience wouldn't be necessarily helpful. But if you have worked on gas pipelines, I mean, in the future we will need to transport the hydrogen as well, for instance. And then there is a business development part, and there are plenty of opportunities. But I just since Leon started to talk about not only soft skills but also other approaches, there is a question by Vitali who asks, which non-engineering areas of expertise in the field of energy transition are most in demand? So everything is in demand, first. The question, I would turn it around. He asked about non-engineering. And very often my students ask me, my students used to ask me, or they sometimes still ask me, I'm not an engineer. I found this course fascinating. I would like to participate, but I have the impression it's just about engineers. It's wrong, totally wrong. Yes, we need engineers, but we need economists. So normally what I tell people is historically, energy was mainly for engineers. Then came the economists and they destroyed the whole system because we used to have monopolies. We used to have the economic job was done by the engineers. The cost cutting, the understanding the cost approach was done by the engineers. Then the economists came in and they said, no, this monopolistic situation is not good. We need to create a market. By creating a market, we needed plenty of lawyers, and so we went through from technicians, from engineers to economists, which are very important. We went through lawyers, which without those you cannot do anything anymore in the modern world. And I claim, and my point is, that in the new world which we are entering, we need all of those, but we need social scientists. very importantly. The energy transition, we cannot win the challenge to bring the world to net zero carbon in 30 years. It's a huge challenge, but we can never succeed if we want to approach the problem top down, as the good old engineers used to do. It doesn't work. We need to have people with us. We need to create ownership among people, and everybody needs, most people need to be convinced that this is important for them, for their children and grandchildren, for society, and only then they will participate. Now we need people able to communicate with people, to bring them to that level. Engineers are not good for that. There may be some, but not. I'm not sure that economists and lawyers are very good for that. They have not been trained for that. We need social scientists. We need sociologists, psychologists, and whoever. So there is a job for everybody. Forget the idea there is no job for. Forget it. Change your mindset. There is a job. Just make sure that you go out, look for something.
Yeah.
Bravo, Manfred.
It was interesting, Tatjana, I saw in the chat as well that Maria was asking that if the energy transition, because Manfred said it takes 30 years, the energy transition is a temporary thing. So then after it's gone, it is done, then we don't need all these people anymore. But that's of course not the case. I mean, it's the same as with any other transition that we had. There are no people now that know exactly on how a steam train works, steam locomotive. But that's just the reason, because they don't exist anymore. But the same people that would have gone towards working with steam locomotives are now working with, for example, natural gas. So the transition, we're going from high carbon to low carbon now, will continue on, and who knows in 40 or 50 years what we then need as a different transition. But we still need the same amount of capabilities in a person to be able to solve these challenges as well.
Absolutely. I have few more questions from the people. So first of all, very interesting one. Does educational format matter? What are the best and the worst formats? I have my hypothesis, but I would like to listen to you first. Who is ready to respond? Leon, what do you think?
I was mentioning it already, that I think that some things you cannot really modernize that much. You know, you need, if you do your formal education first, then you need to have a lot of information thrown your way, and you need to be able to work with tools and with software and things like that. So that's just the way it is. But even that can be much more practical, perhaps, or focused towards real life examples instead of only in theory. But on the other hand, once the things that you have on top of that, so after your education, then I think you really need to look at how people learn nowadays, which is indeed small pieces, very focused, exciting ways of showing it, using the technology that is there, that is available, so that it just makes it much more better to understand and quicker to grasp all this technology. I mean, nobody here, probably some people accepted, are going to read a 200-page handout after you have a video of 15 minutes. So you need to really, combine these things together to make it more quicker and exciting for people to do that. I think that is one of the best examples to do that.
I think, yeah, I fully agree. I think, I mean, in my personal experience, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that I don't pretend to be particularly good in my job, but I'm sure there are better people than me. But
Manfred, we see already comments in the chat from your graduates from Sciences Po who are referring great special thanks to your class, because the guy is writing, as an engineer, I hesitated to join Sciences Po for a master's in the policy field, and so glad I did. Yeah, so Manfred, you are really good in your job.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry for interrupting.
The only thing I can say, I did not pay the person to write this, but anyway. What I think is interactivity is very important. And for instance, I always tried to have a very interactive classes, but over the last 10 years, I changed quite fundamentally the way I do teach. If everything which Leon said is correct, I mean, interactivity is very important. Real life examples are very important. But like in everything, theory alone is boring for most of us, not for all of us, but for most of us. But to see the applications, to see the combination between theory and real world, that is what is interesting. And then with real case examples, they should be used to explain the theory. So this is okay. But the way I have changed the teaching methods, in particular during COVID, and then afterwards, is that in the old days it was mainly me talking in a quite interactive way with the students, but me talking. Today I talk much less, and the students need to work by themselves much more. We discuss what they have done, but much more an American style of teaching as well. So case studies, students they elaborate things, and then we discuss. And there isn't necessarily there. Sometimes there are wrong answers, sometimes there are right answers. That's my role, to help and to moderate. But the most important thing, most of the time, there isn't a right answer. There are different answers. There are an infinitive amount of ways, roads which bring to Rome, as we used to say. There is an infinitive amount of roads which bring us to the energy transition. What is important is to understand what works and what doesn't work in which circumstances.
Yeah, Manfred, Leon, I can only support everything that you've said from my teaching experience. I would also add, this is my COVID takeaway, more of group work for the students, because it helps them to communicate, and the higher level they have, especially when talking about executive education, it's nearly 50% the project work and only 50% like a theoretical part. So yeah, here I completely agree with you. We've got 2 questions on the financial education. Well, not clearly financial, so it sounds this way. Mikhail is asking, we also need innovative financial mechanisms, not only, of course, the energy transition is multidisciplinary. Yeah, so what could that be? And the other question is, to what extent has an energy transition penetrated to top business schools, especially to investment banking, since those people actually make crucially important decisions about energy projects? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think in general, you need innovative financial measures to be able to do this. Because if you, like I said in the beginning, the energy transition, why it started, is not a financial, there's not a financial reason for it. So so you need to think about how do you financially make, for example, cost of all kinds of social impacts of the things that are happening, like how much cost CO2, not only in terms of tons per CO2, but also on the impact that it has on certain parts of the planet, etc. So all these things you need to take into account. So that is, and then if you need to finance that project, because usually the internal rate of return is not that great, you always need to have this more innovative ways of financing it by adding maybe a bit subsidies on the one side, having some bankable finance as well, together with maybe governments or other people that give you a bit of a guarantee on the loan that you want to have put on your project. So it's a very broad question again, because it really depends on which type of technology, the size, etc. you're trying to establish. But that is indeed something that other people, financial people, need to figure out, because there's a very clear reason why we want to do that. And so I would almost say that's a challenge for them to say, okay, give me that creative solution to be able to get this project off the ground. Because I'm also only a humble geologist, so I don't know about that as well.
May I just
Manfred?
add something? Yes, but to the very last part of your question, I think there has been a fundamental change to the finance community and the investment banker, well, to the finance community in general, towards green technologies, towards ESG, towards sustainability, towards decarbonization. You know, I have an experience of about 3 decades in consulting for CEOs and corporations and board of directors of corporations. And in the old days, the only thing which mattered for a CEO when he had to go in front of investors is the bottom line. Today, if he is not able to show the ESGs, what this project is, how it is favoring a transition towards decarbonization. I'm not saying by everybody, but by most of these financial institutions, he will not get the money. And another example, the World Bank does not give any more money, but just as an example, if the project has a C in there, carbon. And it is the same for European Investment Bank, for plenty of this. Maybe sometimes there are some exceptions. Yes, okay, you can start with, they will start with financing, for instance, an LNG import terminal because of the crisis, but you need to show that then it's going to be able to transfer to a hydrogen import terminal, whatever. So another example, the state-owned sovereign fund of Norway, which has been constituted, you know that it is the largest sovereign fund in the world. Second largest is the one of Abu Dhabi. And the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, it has been collected its money by sales of oil and gas from Norway. They have decided, and they need to spend, they are investing the money worldwide, and they are not investing any Norwegian crown or euros or dollar, whatever you want, in carbonated technologies. So you see, people may not be satisfied with the speed. They may not be satisfied with the difference which we often see, because I see them, because when I talk to CEOs, they tell me, yeah, the official talk is like this, but that at the end of the day, they still want to see the bottom line. Of course, they want nobody is, they need to make money. But, and why have this changed? For the simple reason, not because these investment bankers have become better people. Maybe some of them have, but most of them have not. It's not necessarily because we are teaching them in business schools all these new ways that there are other criteria, but bottom line as far as dollar is concerned, profit is concerned. No, because civil society is pushing them to change.
This is true. Absolutely.
It's much more outside influence, I think, than internal change. If you're talking about investment bankers or financial professionals, it's indeed much more that they have to take into account things that we find more important, and that is put into policy or in the investment fund directives, and that means that they have to take that into account more and more.
So we are approaching to the end of 1 hour, and as we've discussed, the modern educational formats are short, so we will not go beyond this threshold. Maybe you have like very short summarizing points that you want to make to finalize our discussion. So I'll give you like 1 minute to Leon, 1 minute to Manfred. Yeah. Key message that you want to deliver to our audience before we will end. So who is ready to start?
I can start if you want.
Leon, go ahead.
Yeah. I think we were talking about the complexity of the energy transition. So in that sense, the energy transition is very complex. That's true, but also don't make it more complex than it is for yourself. So if you really want to, know more about it, if you have some kind of intrinsic motivation to know more about these aspects of the energy transition, or if you can develop that a little bit better, just make sure that you have an idea on where you want to go, find some resources or people to talk to, and keep it then maybe a little bit more basic inside your own. So the example I gave from the guy that was also building a house, then you can also build a pylon for a wind farm. So that is a good example from going from the more traditional to the new, and everybody can do that in every level and every age. So it's very much possible. And we are still 30 years at least working on the energy transition. So there's plenty of time to change.
Great. Thank you, Manfred.
Yeah, my point is similar to the one of Leon, but with other words, and I will keep it shorter. There are plenty of jobs out there. There's a job for everybody and for everybody, and from every discipline, from whatever background you are. There are jobs out there in the energy transition world, if you so wish. If you feel there's a problem, there may be a problem with your mindset. So work on yourself.
Bravo. I couldn't say better, and I will not. I will just thank our speakers for a fantastic hour. I really enjoyed listening to your answers, talking to you. Very inspiring. Guys who are watching us, please do subscribe New Energy Advancement Hub. Please join our community. There is a link under this broadcast, and there will be, I promise, there will be more fun, more interesting materials, more discussions, more inspiring reading. So let's work together on this energy transition, which will become part of our life, whether we want it or not, but we do want. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Dana. And Manfred, of course.